Welcome, everyone, to the latest Detroit Lions Lone Wolves podcast. My goodness, it's the offseason, but always an opportunity to talk football with my guy, Anthony Bellino, WJR host, Detroit Lions in-game host. You see him at everywhere around Michigan football, Michigan basketball. Anthony, always good to talk to you, especially now when things calm down a little bit in the offseason.
Yeah, John. I mean, usually it's the other way around. I'm the one always texting you going, "Hey, you got any time for me?" And look at us now, man. It's a pleasure to be with you. Thanks for having me. And yeah, I mean, the off season probably happened a little sooner than a lot of Lions fans would have liked, me included, you included. But at the end of the day, you never. That's the interesting thing about the NFL postseason, right? Is the fact that we're up there and Lomas Brown and I buy you dinner, right? You know what I mean? A little press box dinner for you, and we didn't know that was gonna be the last time we're gonna see each other in a while. So it's nice to see your face.
Absolutely, man. It's always good to talk about what happened with the Lions, what's going to happen in the future, and we turn our attention to the roster and the decisions that got to be made. But yes, you said it. The season was cut short. Now that a couple weeks have passed, how do you process what happened during the 2024 season, especially with the early playoff exit?
One of the things that, I got a lot of pushback about was the fact that I don't think that you can actually talk about the 2024 Detroit Lions season, a campaign that, mind you, went 15-2, right? The most wins regular season, albeit 17 games. They tied the record last year with 12 wins. They get to 15 wins this year. And for me, you can't tell that story without talking about who wasn't available on the field on a week-to-week basis. And there's always a lot of pushback. Well, injuries are no excuse. And I really appreciated Dan Campbell's sentiment when he would take the podium and he would be asked this very question about who's available and who's not. And I understood what he was trying to do, right? It doesn't matter. The guys who aren't available, they can't help us out on game day. And Brad Holmes' commentary when he had his one-on-one with the team reporter, Danny Rogers, which is, I mean, that's just sensational. He said, look, you can't mope guys back to health, paraphrasing. And I think that was really a very, very true. But at the same time, you can't tell the story of 2024 without talking about the guys who weren't on the field. And that is the injury bug hitting this team at an unprecedented rate. I mean, nobody in the NFL has ever seen anything like this. And so for this team to be able to survive and win as many games as they did under the circumstances with as many new faces as they were bringing in on pretty much a week-to-week basis, it was a special year. I think a year that a lot of fans will always wonder what if, and for that reason alone, I think that that's kind of maybe what rubs Lions fans the wrong way, and maybe that's the right way to say it, but just leaving something to be desired. And I think that the players would definitely kind of reinforce that sentiment as well.
Yeah, you said it. What if? You saw, clearly one player that you could not have go down was Aiden Hutchinson, but the defense still kept going. That was wild. Was many people thought right then and there the Lions season ends in Dallas, but they were able to bounce back, win games, have a long winning streak, earn the number one seed. So there was a lot to be, thankful for this Detroit Lions 2024 season. But when you get to the postseason, a lot has to go right, and part of it is the luck factor. When you look at who the opponent is, and I just thought the matchup, when you look at it from a perspective of having Washington come to town and they're young and hungry, they got nothing to lose, and like a lot of people said, the Lions chose the absolute worst day to play their worst football game. But it's one of those deals where now we turn the page and you say, okay, there's opportunities to learn from the recently completed Super Bowl, the Eagles, the Chiefs. What did you make of the contest? I know it was not that great of a game, but do you look at the Eagles and you say, you know what? Yeah, it's great to, at least when you look at football, the age-old adage is true. Defense wins championships, and the Lions have, I think, pretty much secured one side of the ball when you look at offensively. If you just upgrade, to me, the defense, the defensive line, you get improvements and growth in the secondary. You have great players at linebacker and at safety. If you shore up that one position at defensive line, I believe that there's a great opportunity for the Detroit Lions to kind of be right back in there in the mix in the NFC.
Oh, no doubt about it. I think that as the Super Bowl as a whole, I loved, right? Because I had Chiefs fatigue. Like, I was done with Travis Kelce. I was over Patrick Mahomes. I didn't need to see Taylor Swift. I didn't need to hear Brittany Mahomes. All of that stuff I was good on. And I don't know necessarily why I felt that way, because I didn't feel that way when the Patriots were, in their, 20-year reign of terror across the NFL. Maybe it's social media, maybe it's the way that life has evolved here, so maybe that plays a role in it. I'm not too sure. But I think that when you look at how Philadelphia was able to handle things defensively, obviously they get a big pick six from Cooper DeJean. That was sensational. But you talked about it. Defense wins championships. It's the fundamental aspect of football. So as much as offenses can change, and we can throw hook and ladders all day, and we can have Penei Sewell throwing passes, and we can run shovel, like reverse shovel passes, and do all of this fun stuff. If you can't control the line of scrimmage, you can't control the game. And Philly really highlighted this, because I'm a firm believer of you got to be able to get to the quarterback with four. And they did that for 4 quarters, and they did it relentlessly, to the point where Patrick Mahomes, who is arguably the best quarterback in the NFL to date, looked so uncomfortable. And for the first time in a long time, at least the first time I can remember, he had happy feet back there. He was looking in anticipating pressure. In the Eagles defense, when you can bring 4 and drop 7, you can do it in a myriad of different fashions. The fact that they were able to get 6 sacks and 11 quarterback hits or something like that off the top of my head with only bringing 4 guys, I mean, that just shows the rest of the league the vital importance of being able to win one-on-one matchups at the line of scrimmage. Can you scheme your D-line to do enough that it provides them some opportunity? But then also, the X's and the O's versus the Jimmy and the Joes, right? You have to have those horses. And for a comparison standpoint, and all Lions fans know this, when you take Aiden Hutchinson off the field, the guy who is going to be a candidate for Defensive Player of the Year, I mean, he had 7.5 sacks, and I think as a team, we might have had 29-ish, give or take, for the entirety of the campaign without having it right in front of me. So I think that when you look at the impact that one guy can have, if you can pair that with some more pressure on the other edge. And I look back to the season, like I'm wondering about James Houston, right? What happened there? We saw him in his freshman campaign pin his ears back and get 8.5 sacks or whatever it was. And then there's the little bit of movement where they're going to try to, tinker around and see, does he work as a linebacker? And then that experiment didn't necessarily work. He gets injured and he never got back to form. You look at John Kaminsky, a guy who played with oven mitts on his hands 2 years ago. He broke both his hands. He's running around there, sock 'em boppers, right? And it's like, okay, you lose him in training camp. All right. Then you lose Aiden Hutchinson. And then Aleem McNeil goes down to a torn knee. So we're going to have to wait on him to see at what point he will be back to 100%. And it's like, man, the guys that they were able to pick up, Zadarius Smith, Muhammad was great as well. They had some impact guys there. What did you get out of Josh Paschal, Levi Onwuzurike trying to get back to health? Because I look at the Super Bowl, and, when Tampa Bay won it a couple of years ago with Tom Brady, the one thing that really stuck out to me is that their linebackers ran really well sideline to sideline. They tracked the football and they tackled it. Well, I feel like, okay, Derek Barnes, another injury, which I'm still upset at the Arizona Cardinals. I thought that was a cheap shot. I thought that the tight end feints high, goes low at the last minute, and it cost Derek Barnes a season. I'm a big believer in Derek Barnes, a guy that you can see coaching and development in real time and the impact he was having. Another guy, impact guy, comes in off the bench, doesn't matter, can play special teams. Malcolm Rodriguez. Sure, he was a hard knocks darling, right? And they draft linebacker, and you see a guy who, did it affect him? It probably did, right? He probably had those moments like, okay, why wasn't my season good enough? But every time his number was called, that dude answered the bell until he gets hurt, right? And so I'm looking at the Super Bowl trying to find ways to evaluate what are other teams really doing and what are they really good at. Philadelphia was really good at running the ball. They tried relentlessly with Saquon. He had 25 carries and 70 some yards. It's not like he was he was a killer back there, but they hit some, some deep strikes. They did some good things on offense. But for me, that MVP award goes to the defensive line. They should have just brought the whole D line up there and said, here you go. Here's your trophy. We'll get you a couple more copies of it so everyone can have one for the living room, because that's what I want to see out of our Detroit Lions. We talk about complementary football all the time. Your defense has to complement your offense to your special teams, and so on and so forth. Well, complementary football works on one side of the football as well. If your D line is getting to the quarterback, that means you can drop more into coverage. And if your D-line is getting to the quarterback, your guys don't have to cover as long, right? It gives your back end more opportunities. I mean, you got guys like Brian Branch who, he makes the pick 6 in his first game in Kansas City, and I'm like, this is something different here. We got a different kind of player here. Kirby Joseph, I mean, talk about coaching and development. My goodness, leads the NFL in interceptions. The heck with the Pro Bowl. Let's get him an All-Pro. You have very capable players there in that back end. You can help them out if you can apply pressure to the quarterback, and vice versa. right? They don't have to cover as long if you get to the quarterback. You're giving your D line more opportunities if you're covering really well to let that clock run a little bit. So it's interesting. A lot of good lessons there. But Philadelphia is a team in the NFC, man. I don't know if they're going anywhere anytime soon, much like Washington.
Exactly. They're not going anywhere anytime soon. And then you got to also look at the Chicago Bears in your own division. The division's not going to get any easier in the NFC North. It was already tough to secure the back-to-back title in 24. I think 25, potentially, you're going to have four teams that are all going to be vying for a playoff opportunity. But speaking of the defensive line, that's what everybody is talking about is, all right, Brad Holmes and the Lions have basically said, and they've cemented their position.
Oh,
Draft
Myles
and
Garrett. Yeah, you're
yeah,
just
of
going to
course.
hear that. That's what he
Draft
cemented.
and develop. Draft and develop. So it's in your head. Okay, draft and develop. Draft and develop. Patience. But there are not too many opportunities where a player of Myles Garrett caliber is out there saying, "Move me. I don't want this opportunity anymore to be with the team that drafted me. I don't see the future." So you look at it from the Lions' perspective and you say, "Man, it's a perfect fit because look, you give up a couple first round picks, they're all going to be 28 to 32. You're not going to find a player potentially the caliber of what you're going to get in Myles Garrett. So in my mind, you're like, okay, I'm not so beholden to draft picks, but you talk to people and they get a little unsettled. They know how good Brad Holmes is in regards to picking, talented individuals that fit the mold. That's how you go from a 3-win team to a 15-win team. But I think that in order to go from a 15-win team and a regular season darling to a playoff darling is you need a couple more dogs. You need a couple more game changers that are going to make plays at the critical moment. So in my mind, I'm all about, hey, you want for 2 first round picks, no players? I'm all about it. Maybe you can wait it out and kind of bring that price down a little bit, maybe a first rounder and a day 2 pick that could entice the Browns. But where are you at with Myles Garrett, and how do you weigh in when people have the debate about, look, let Brad do his thing, and who needs a mega star to come to Detroit? But to me, stars sell tickets, and also stars make plays in big games like the Super Bowl that you're trying to win.
Yeah, so a couple of things. And I am one of those people. I'm very frugal, right? I mean, when it comes to the salary cap, I look at this thing like it's my money, right? I'm like the Dave Chappelle gif where he's got the crown and all the dollars. Like, don't touch my money. That's the way that I approach the salary cap. The NFL draft is the same way. But at the end of the day, Myles Garrett is I mean, he's going to Canton. There's no doubt about it. Like, that guy is a Hall of Fame player at the age of 29. I am more than comfortable. I mean, Calais Campbell's playing at 38, right? Cam Hayward, I forget how old he is, but he's not exactly, a young pup in this game because you figure that NFL years kind of like dog years. So when I look at Myles Garrett, people might be worried about the age. The production has never stopped. You you will get more out of Myles Garrett with Aiden Hutchinson on the other side. Because just think about it like this: you got Myles on one side, Aiden on the other, and Aleem McNeil with Jack Campbell, Alex Anzalone, Derek Barnes behind you, whoever else you want at the defensive tackle position. That's a front seven that you can put in however you want to break it down, whether it's NFC, AFC, NFL as a total. That's a front seven that has people's attention. That causes serious concern. And like we said with Philadelphia, you get to the quarterback with 4. I mean, imagine if you had a little bit of zone help underneath where, you don't have to necessarily stick your young rookie corner Terrion Arnold on an island all season long. And he did a great job. Carlton Davis did a great job. Amik Robertson did a great job. Carlton breaks his jaw. Amik breaks his arm. I mean, what in God's green earth is going on out here? Anyways, back to Myles Garrett. We are not, and this is a psychological project, right? Because we as a fan base, and I talked a lot about this on the radio, how will we handle the first loss of the season? Because we're not used to being here, right? We've entered a different discussion and we're in a different room, right? So it's like the first time you go into like a board meeting. You want to make sure you look nice and your presentation is good, and you're going to meet a whole bunch of new people that you might think are, a caliber above where you are at. But you have to believe in yourself and believe in your skill set that you belong in that room to have those conversations with those people. Same thing applies to our fan base and where we're at right now. We are in a different room, right? We are now in conversations where it's where do the Lions fall at in the playoff picture, right? Do they have enough to win the final game? It's no longer a pipe dream, it's reality, which also means we're not picking in the top half of the draft unless Brad Holmes is going to make a move and try to adjust some things to go fly up there and figure out and find a guy that he really, really likes. Do I trust Brad Holmes? Yeah, I think just about everybody who's listening to this and most people around the NFL believe that he is extremely good because as a GM, you're going to make your hay rounds 2 through 7, right? And who you can acquire undrafted, who you can develop, who's on your coaching staff that's going to make that happen. The first rounders, I mean, those are kind of the softballs. Like, you just assume your GM is going to hit on those first round picks. It doesn't always work out like that, and that's why guys end up getting fired. But he's done such a good job of finding talent third, fourth, fifth round that you almost have to, as a Lions fan, kind of adjust your way of thinking. We're not drafting top half of the draft. It's not even the top, 75% of the draft. Our draft picks are going to look different. So if you're going to give up, it was Colton Pouncey of the Athletic, and I believe the trade was first round pick this year, first round pick next year, as well as a third round pick this year, plus Hendon Hooker in exchange for Myles Garrett and a fourth rounder coming back. I mean, I'm not saying no. Who's driving? That's the first thing. That's the question I'm asking. Like, I like Cleveland, good city, right? And so, from that perspective, when you have the ability, because what you're doing is you're evaluating potential versus legitimate NFL production. We have a guy. We've got plenty of tape. We've got plenty of resume. He said it's not about the money. It's not about the Hall of Fame. It's about winning. And I'm like, all right, Myles, how serious are you about that comment? Because it's not about the money when everybody can, chip in a few bucks here. We heard Joe Burrow talk about it earlier this week, restructuring to free up some cap space and trying to get his team. We watched Tom Brady do it for decades where he needed to figure out a way to move some money around in order to make sure that he had the best possible team around him that gave him the best chance to win. So if that deal was actually on the table, if I was Brad Holmes, yeah, who's driving? Well, I'm doing that without a doubt. Can they drive the price down? Will the price go up if a team like Washington wants to get in the mix because they feel like, hey, this isn't just a flash in the pan? I don't know if I necessarily see, and we always usually see it rookie to sophomore, where you have that little bit of regression where teams have some tape on you. Jaden Daniels is a little bit different. He's a little bit different, and they were actually pretty good and pretty close, and they've got a good coaching staff. They've got all the pieces that they need. They might feel inclined that, hey, we got the quarterback on the rookie deal. We can spend a little bit more right now. That's a team that I worry about. So if Cleveland is willing to meet his demands, right? Because, Andrew Berry, their GM, has been outspoken and saying, we don't want to deal him. Well, I mean, push comes to shove, and he's like, you better deal me or I'm not playing. Then you have to get something in return. If it's available and it's feasible, then yes, I would prefer that the Lions make that move.
Yeah, and if you don't, here's the thing. You got teams like the Bills that are hungry, the Ravens, teams that definitely want to be aggressive, the Chiefs maybe want to reload. You look at it and you say, okay, if you don't make the move, who's going to make it? The Packers, who could be the team that ends up winding up with Myles Garrett? You just want to be in the mix. You want to just be one of those teams that's making the calls, making the offers, and we'll see. And if not Myles Garrett, you also do, he's not the only star potential defensive end that could be out there. Still Max Crosby, still Trey Hendrickson. There's still opportunities to find that. And I do think it's just unique that the Lions have had that clear. It's kind of like in the past, the Tigers closer, the Wings goalie. You just need who's going to be that edge opposite of Aiden, and they haven't found it just yet. And as the season progressed, it was one of the talking points of the year, and especially when Aiden goes down. That'll be one of the key decisions this offseason. Who plays opposite of Aiden Hutchinson? And that'll be key because you want to also continue to have Aiden shine and not just be the sole guy to pressure and sack the quarterback. It's true, Anthony. I don't know if you've seen the numbers, but man, the final month of the season, the Lions' defensive numbers tanked. They were
Yeah.
rough. And you just want to make sure you do everything this offseason to make sure that this defense gets back out there. Plus, you look at that road schedule, and I'm going to be hopefully making a couple more road trips in Cincy, Baltimore, Washington, KC. You're going to play the creme de la creme this upcoming season. So you want to have as much, as many weapons on both sides of the ball as possible. Now, turning our attention to the other aspect that has people talking is the upheaval in the coaching staff. You now have, look, when you're one of the teams to beat in the NFL, it's a copycat league and they're open about it. It was great to hear the Jets kind of talk about, hey, we loved Aaron Glenn because he was working in Detroit and we saw, whoa, where they were and now where they're at. And it's definitely remarkable what Aaron Glenn, Ben Johnson were able to do. So naturally, they both were able to find opportunities elsewhere. Well, unfortunately, they have friends on the Lions, and those friends answered those calls, and they took some coaches with them. So now there is a little bit of an upheaval. I think people are a little more comfortable with Kelvin Sheppard on defense because of the fact that there is a lineage to Aaron Glenn. There is a tie there. So there should be expectation of familiarity. What is your thoughts on the coaching staff upheaval, especially on offense too, where you have a new offensive coordinator and you have a passing game coordinator with David Shaw, you have a new tight ends coach, you have a little bit of shifting with Choice coming to town to work with the running backs and Montgomery working with the wideouts. How do you make of now the Lions coaching staff looking a little bit different in 2025?
Yeah, it is interesting. I think that most Lions fans are happy for Aaron Glenn, right? For him to get his shot to go to the New York Jets. We don't have to dislike the Jets anymore. We don't have to necessarily like them, but the fact that they're going to go a different direction with their quarterback, Aaron Glenn's not going to put up with that, and I feel like he's going to have a really good time with the New York media. I think he's going to handle it very well because he's a no nonsense kind of person. So I like that. Ben Johnson, on the other hand, the fact that he went to Chicago, I think that that really bothered a lot of Lions fans because it was like, how could you go get your brand new girlfriend and move into the house right down the road, right? And it was like, oh my good. At the end of the day, you're bringing in an offensive coordinator that has experience with a lot of players on this team because of his time here in Detroit in Coach Morton. A lot of the language within the playbook is going to be similar. The Sean Payton ties there as well. Working in Denver, I feel comfortable on offense. I do like the hook and ladders. I do. I do like the creativity on offense because it's something that the wrinkles worked because we have such a commitment to being able to run the football. Right, we have David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. And so offensively, you can get away with some things because teams don't know. You don't know what you don't know. You don't expect to see, the hook and ladders, and you don't expect to see the reverse shovel passes because, how do you prepare for something like that? Chicago will get a healthy dose of it, right? I mean, it'll be interesting to see what kind of wrinkles we see from Ben Johnson that he carried over from Detroit, and then in our two meetings, does he try to pull some rabbits out of the hat, and can we take advantage of some of those play calls? That'll be interesting. I like the continuity on defense. I think that that's what most Lions fans felt like Kelvin Sheppard. I know there was some people that were interested in Robert Saleh, obviously some local ties there as well. But for Coach Shep to get this opportunity, and early on in one of his press conferences, he was talking about paraphrasing here and trying to summarize quickly. He was talking about having to cut his hair, right? And Dan Campbell said, "Why would you do that? Like, I love your hair. Like, I want you to be the person that you are." And I think that when it comes to personalities within the building and allowing people to have that sort of freedom, right? What do good leaders do? Good leaders, the three most powerful words in leadership are "it's my fault," right? And you got to take extreme ownership of the entire situation. And Dan Campbell does that relentlessly. Everything is always his fault. And he also, as a good leader, allows those that are quote unquote under him to make decisions and to feel empowered. And that's what builds a really good open culture within that locker room where guys can feel safe and secure. There's an honesty level that is there as well. So I feel like, I know that it's difficult because we wanted this season to work out, right? And that's probably what makes it hurt even more, is because we knew based off of the coaching cycle last year that Ben Johnson couldn't turn down another job, right? I mean, at the end of the day, there's only 32 of them out there. And if you really want to be a head coach, you really want to give it a run, you're going to have to say yes at some point, right? Do I think that he said yes because we peaked? No, I don't believe that at all. I think that for most of us listening to this right now, the Chicago Bears offer you 13 million. Hell, I'll help you pack your bags, right? You know what I mean? Like, go ahead, like do your thing. And so, yeah, I get the resentment maybe there for Ben Johnson because that's the team that he went to. I think we all would have felt better if it would have been New Orleans or Las Vegas or, I don't know, Saskatchewan. He can go anywhere he wants, not in the division. For Aaron Glenn, I think there's more of a collective, like, okay, now we're rooting for you. Go be great, and then we'll see you when we see you down the road.
Yeah. Now, do you think that when you see the hiring of Choice, you kind of now bring in a new running backs coach to work with David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs? It kind of lends to the idea that, okay, with John Morton, you recognize that there should be a little bit more of an emphasis now, too, on giving the football to your skill players. And I do think that Jahmyr Gibbs kind of has that Saquon Barkley effect, a guy that can take over games, a guy that can be a home run threat. Maybe you kind of on third down and one, pound the rock with one of your two great running backs. And I think that, I think there's an opportunity here when you look at it in 2025 to continue to highlight one of the stars on your team in Jahmyr Gibbs. What did you make of his development in year two? I thought that what you saw was a player gain confidence. You saw his work in the weight room. You see a player that, you know what? Okay, yeah, there's going to be always a debate about running backs, but there's still a spot for running backs in this NFL. And I think Jahmyr Gibbs is going to find himself getting the football a lot more in 2025.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting when Monty went down with the injury and then he's getting closer to coming back. There was that conversation within the Lions fandom of like who should get more touches, right? And I didn't necessarily agree with our opening drive of the playoff game. Like, I mean, it's not a shot at David Montgomery. Jahmyr Gibbs was just in such a good groove, and then I thought that when Monty came out of the field, everybody and their mother knew runs were coming, right? Because we knew, okay, let's see if how healthy he is, establish him early. We're right back to Sonic and Knuckles. I love the fact that those guys ran out of the tunnel together and that they don't seem to have a, you know, looking over the back of my shoulder, trying to see what's that guy doing. Like they seem genuinely involved. There's a commitment financially to David Montgomery, and there will be a commitment to Jahmyr Gibbs too. Like this guy, he is, he is, he's elite. He's elite. Like he is Chris Johnson. I know Alvin Kamara gets brought up a lot. I think you can throw Saquon in there. In production wise, you could probably throw in Derrick Henry too. And the only thing where people hear that, like, what are you talking about? It's a size thing. It's the build of the player because Jahmyr looks the way that he does. We automatically assume that's Alvin Kamara, right? Is he Marshall Falk? Like this kid is unbelievable. He can run between the tackles. He can pass protect. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. And one of the things I really like about him is he'll show a little bit of emotion, but most of the time he's just a real business-like. He's kind of got that Barry Sanders, like, here's a first down, take the ball, right? I mean, they score, they get their touchdown dance together with the group, and that's all fun. He carries himself in such a way that I think that there's a level of lethality there with David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. And the more that you can run the football, Lomas talks about this all the time because, run blocking is an aggressive move, is what Lomas says. And you start to do that early, you start to take that step forward, you are establishing yourself. Pass protection is a passive move, right? You're moving backwards away from the line of scrimmage. You're allowing them to kind of set the tone on the physicality level there at the point of attack. So I find that very interesting. I also want to highlight Christian Mahogany, right? Because, in a big time game, couple times this season, it went, he starts two games, one's a playoff game, and a couple weeks prior to the playoff game, did a really good job at that guard spot. Like that is, I know Giovanni Manu was kind of like a developmental pick there because of where he played at in overall size and what can we, let's draft this guy because you can't teach size. So let's draft him and see what we can, turn him into. Christian Mahogany played some really good football on that offensive line when we desperately needed him to. And, when you think about the guys up front, you have Sewell, you have Decker, you have Ragnow, right? What are you going to do at those guard positions? Like what happens next? The fact that Mahogany got some legitimate run there and played very well, I think that's a key point because you can't run the football, can't throw the football if you're not strong up front, right? Just like we were talking about D-line, it's all about line of scrimmage.
No doubt. Always enjoyed talking football with Anthony Bellino, kind of the voice of reason. And you look at it from the perspective of this Detroit Lions football team. The stock is still rising. Yeah, they took a step back in 2024, but when you have a core group of athletes that really, I think, embody what Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell want, I think that now the next step in the evolution of the Lions is you've reached success. How long do you sustain it and how high? What's the ceiling for this football team? And I'm firmly of the belief with what they have, they can have multiple rebuilds and get back into the playoff mix pretty regularly. But in the end, just like everybody else, we need the cherry on top of the cake. Hopefully, in the next couple of years, they're able to one day hoist the Lombardi Trophy. Everybody, I think, deserves in that organization from the work that they did back in 2021 to kind of build a respectable NFL team that other teams can model as well. Let's just hope that this Detroit Lions team can one day hopefully win that Lombardi Trophy. Maybe it's going to be in Santa Clara, maybe it'll be in SoFi, but we'll be here at Lions on SI and the Lone Wolves podcast to break it all down. I listen to the radio in the morning, there's AB. I listen in the evening, there's AB. Tell everybody where people can listen to your takes and your work on air.
So Spin on Sports on the Great Voice Network. So we launched that in July. We have 7 affiliated stations across Michigan and in Northwest Ohio. So Grand Rapids, Flint, Midland, Bay City, Grayling, Toledo, Ann Arbor. You can check us out at AB Spin on Sports for the Twitter handle. And then weeknights at 6 p.m. That's weekday mornings from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. I should mention. And then weeknights with Lomas Brown on 760 WJR at 6 p.m. Lo and I dive into, it's all Detroit, and of course Michigan State, kind of focus on like the Big Six, if you will. So that's going on, and Michigan basketball handled the PA there, and then in-game hosting for the Lions and for Michigan football. And I was running late today. I appreciate you, John, being so gracious with your time. I felt terrible. You're always there when I call, and here I am scrambling around because I also work at my family's grocery store down in Monroe as a butcher. So I gave you the thumbs up via the picture, and yeah, man, it's an interesting career. That much is for certain.
Yeah, no doubt. But look, you're one of the hardest working individuals, and I always appreciate the time that you gave me back when you were with Fox in Toledo doing
Oh
radio
yeah.
work out there. So we've talked for quite a bit. I respect what you do. I respect your grind. See you out there at Michigan, at the big house. See you everywhere, and I always enjoy a conversation. So more continued lunch on me next time at the Lions, 1 o'clock or so, when we get a chance to talk again next time. Thanks everybody for tuning in to the Lone Wolves podcast. Find it everywhere you listen to your favorite podcast, and definitely check out every single day Lions on SI.